Chapter 11. Pain is a liar. It tells you that you have reached the limit, that there is nothing left to feel. And then it finds a new gear to shift. It finds a hidden nerve, a fresh way to twist the soul until you're begging for the very darkness that used to terrify you. I was flickering. My consciousness was a skipping stone, bouncing violently between the TV screen of Alex's eyes on level 5 and the sensory nightmare of my real body on level 81. I was no longer a passenger. I was a stretched wire being pulled in two directions by a pair of gods who didn't care if I snapped. 1 second I felt the cold, humid air of the elevator shaft and the frantic, hollow beat of Alex's heart. The next, I was submerged in a tank of boiling fluid on level 81. I could feel the silver sensors snaked into my spine. They weren't just recording data anymore. They were melting into my nerves, bounding my soul to the machine. I was the bridge, and the bridge was melting into the abyss. On level 5, the world had tilted 45 degrees. The spire's internal gravity was no longer a law. It was just a suggestion. Alex was slammed against the side of the elevator box. His fingers were clawing at the mirrored obsidian walls until his fingernails started to bleed. Through his eyes, I saw the white emergency lights strobing. Short, jagged bursts of light that made the hallway look like a series of still photographs from a massacre. In my real body, the alarm was a physical scream. High alert! Vessel synchronization falling. Output levels at 240%. I felt the yellow nodes at the base of the spire working like a vacuum. They were pulling the gold essence out of my real bones so fast that the pressure in the tank was reaching a critical point. The fluid was turning from blue to a violent, boiling gold. Then came the snap. It wasn't a fade-out. It was an explosion of silence. I was violently ejected from the passenger seat of Alex's mind. The TV screen shattered into a million black shards. For a split second, I felt Alex's terror, the sudden hollow vacuum in his head as he realized the voice was gone. He was finally alone in his own skin, a disappointed potato left to rot in a falling needle. I was slammed back into level 81 with the weight of a falling mountain. I opened my eyes inside the tank. My vision was blurred by the gold-tinged fluid. I saw the lab through the thick glass, a distorted nightmare of smoke and screaming technicians. I was no longer watching the world. I was back in the cage. The lab was a vision of clinical hell. Lewis was at the main console. His grey robe was soaked in a cold, oily sweat. His fingers were flying across the keyboard that was spitting white sparks and black smoke. He looked less like a captain of the Royal Guard and more like a man trying to hold back a hurricane with a paper shield. "Synchronization is dead!" a technician screamed, clutching his head as blood started leaking from his ears. "The link to the student on level 5 is gone. The gold mana is backing up into the local grid." "Then terminate the vessel!" Lewis roared, with his face twisted into a mask of pure, desperate insanity. "If we can't hold the gold essence, nobody can. I will not lose my work to an islander glitch. Delete Alex. Initiate the cerebral purge now." He slammed his fist into the console, aiming for the command that would have turned Alex's brain into a pile of grey ash. But the ceiling didn't wait for his command. The obsidian roof of the lab didn't fall. It was deleted. A massive, jagged circle of stone was vaporized by a roar of red fire. Martha dropped through the hole like a falling star. Her tattered red velvet dress was whipping around her legs. She landed in the center of the room, and the impact shattered the floor into pieces. The red and elven energy were vibrating off her skin in visible waves, being a halo of lethal, beautiful light. She looked at Louis, and her eyes became a white-hot crimson. "Louis," she whispered. The word carried the weight of the power she had consumed. "I believe we have a debt to settle. Quel dommage! You look so stressed. Is the simulation not to your liking today, my dear?" Louis scrambled backwards. His heels started slipping in the spilled stasis fluid. "Philia, wait, stay back. We can negotiate. The boy is still alive. The gold essence is stable. Think of the balance." "The balance is a lie, told by men who are too afraid to bleed themselves," Martha hissed, with her voice now being a predatory purr. "You put me in a cage of boredom. You made me flip burgers and count receipts while you drained the only thing I love. You didn't just take his power, petit rat. You tried to erase him." Louis snarled, finding a spark of his old arrogance as he grabbed a crystal staff from a dead guard. He swung it, unleashing a jagged bolt of white energy. Martha didn't even raise her hand. She simply stepped through the spell, with the white light shattering against her red aura like glass against a tank. She was on him in a heartbeat. Martha grabbed Louis by the throat. Her clawed fingers sank into the soft flesh of his neck. She lifted him off the floor with a strength that was purely demonic. "I promised a king I would become a monster," she whispered, with her face being centimeters from his. "Let's see if your gray mask covers the fear in your heart." She didn't use a spell for the kill. She wanted it to be violent. She drove her free hand into his chest, with her fingers acting like red-hot chisels. I watched through the tank glass, paralyzed, as she tore his rib cage open from the center of his body. The sound was a horrific, wet snapping of bone, like dry branches being broken under a heavy boot. Louis tried to scream, but his mouth was full of his own expanding blood. Martha reached inside the cavity. Her hand was glowing with a violent red light and simply unstitched his lungs from his chest. She pulled them out, steaming purple masses of tissue, and tossed them onto the floor like trash. Louis's eyes didn't just pop. They melted, two streams of gelatin-like fluid running down his cheeks as the pressure inside his skull reached the breaking point from the mana she was pumping into him. With a final sickening crack, she snapped his spine in 3 places and let his hollowed-out corpse slump into the pool of blue stasis fluid. Martha stood in the center of the gore. Her red dress was painted in a deeper shade of crimson. She looked at his remains with a terrifying, wide-eyed satisfaction. Then she knelt. She dipped her fingers into the pooling blood of the man who had tortured us and brought them to her lips. As she drank, her eyes were rolling back in her head as a crazy, triumphant smile spread across her face. She looked insane. A predator who had finally tasted the heart of the enemy. "Refund accepted," she murmured, with her voice sounding like a lover's secret. Back on level 5, the world was a graveyard of obsidian. Alex was standing in the open elevator shaft, clutching the frame as the spire was groaning beneath him. For the first time in a while, his head was silent. There was no other passenger, there was no machine voice, there was only the sound of his own frantic, shallow breathing. Margot was standing on the ledge opposite him, with her travel cloak discarded. Her hands were a blur of golden yellow threads, weaving into the machinery of the shaft. She looked like an ancient spirit of the sea, with her amber eyes burning with a professional, lethal focus. "Margot!" Alex screamed with his voice cracking. "What did you do? Where did he go?" "He's gone back to the source, Alex," she shouted over the roar of the spire's collapse. "The link is broken. You are free now." "Free?" Alex let out a jagged, bitter laugh. The building is falling and everything is on fire. Who are you, Margot? What is this magic that you are using? Margot paused, with her fingers still holding the yellow threads. She looked at him, and for a fleeting second, the professional mask slipped. There was a genuine, agonizing pity in her eyes. I'm a ground wire, Alex. I was sent here to rot the spire so my people could take the sun, she said, with her voice dropping below the roar of the wind. But I didn't expect to find someone like you, someone so empty. You were just supposed to be the container, Alex. The department used you as an insulation, and I used you as a shield. Alex stepped towards the edge, with his unfriendly, gloomy face twisting in pain. It was all a lie? The study sessions, the walks to the portals, you were just supposed to plant those nodes and that's it? Not all of it, Margot whispered, with her yellow aura flickering. But it doesn't matter now. Listen to me. Take the maintenance stairs. Go down to level 1. There is a yellow portal hidden behind the secondary cooling pipes. It's an Islander dead drop. If you reach it, you can escape to the west. You will be a ghost, Alex. No department, no grey masks, just you. Come with me, Alex begged, reaching across the gap. If the building is falling, we can go together. Margot shook her head, with her face setting into a hard, cold line. I have to go up. The Red Queen has breached level 81. If she claims the source, she becomes a god that even the islands can't stop. I have to intercept her. I have to secure the gold essence before she turns it into a weapon of mass destruction. You will die. She killed the archmages, Margot. She's a monster. Then I will die doing my job, Margot said, with her yellow thread suddenly tightening, pulling her upwards into the darkness of the shaft. She looked down at him one last time. You were never just a potato to me, Alex. You were the only real thing in this whole needle. Now run. Don't let my work be wasted for nothing. She leaped, disappearing into the vertical dark emptiness like a golden spark. Alex stood alone on the edge of the abyss. He looked down at his scarred hands, the hands that had held hers, the hands that had been a cage for a star. He looked at the spire falling around him and felt the weight of his own life for the first time. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just turned and began to run down the stairs, being a solitary grey mask fleeing the graveyard of the gods. Martha turned away from the heap of grey cloth that had just been Louis. Her face was splattered with his blood. She didn't look at the carnage she had left behind. Her eyes, wide, shimmering with an unstable red light, were fixed on the tank where I hung like a preserved specimen. Max, she whispered, with her voice being a jagged melody. I am here, mon cœur. No more burgers, no more receipts, just the sun and the moon, like we promised. She reached out to touch the glass, but the air behind her didn't just vibrate. It hummed with the sound of 1,000 tightening wires. A bolt of yellow energy, sharp as a needle and smelling of sea salt, slammed into her shoulder. The force was enough to throw even Martha across the room, with her body sliding over the obsidian floor and crashing into a row of shattered monitors. Margot dropped from the ceiling hatch. She landed in a crouch. Her hands were already weaving a frantic, glowing web of yellow threads. She looked nothing like the girl who had sat next to Alex in Auditorium 95. Her amber eyes were frozen, clinical and lethal. She wasn't a student, she was a predator from the deep. An islander who had been waiting for this exact moment the spire throat was cut. Step away from the tank, Martha, Margot commanded. Her voice was steady, stripped of its former warmth. The islands won't let you have the source. You are a dying star and you're going to turn him into ash, just to keep yourself from going dark. Martha rolled to her feet, with a snarl curling over her blood-stained lips. She let out a laugh that sounded like a saw hitting stone. An islander spy in my kitchen? C'est ridicule. You think your little fishing nets can hold a queen who has eaten the archmages of Darton and the Elven Ten? I don't need to hold a queen, Margot spat, with her fingers dancing in the air. I just need to ground the circuit. She slammed both hands into the floor. A forest of yellow thorns erupted from the obsidian tiles, lashing out at Martha's legs. Martha roared, with a sound of pure red fury, and met the attack head-on. She didn't dodge, she simply pulsed. A massive dome of red and elven energy erupted from her chest, vaporizing the yellow thorns before they could touch her boots. The fight was a nightmare of clashing frequencies. Margot moved like a shadow. Her yellow threads were forming shields that hummed with the weight of the ocean. She was fast, blurring across the room. Her magic was seeking the leaks in Martha's overcharged aura. She managed to catch Martha's wrist with a yellow whip, grounding the red energy into the floor. The impact caused a massive explosion that sent a cloud of obsidian dust and shattered glass into the air. Margot lunged as a jagged yellow blade appeared in her hand. She drove it towards Martha's heart with the precision of an assassin. Martha caught the blade with her bare hand. The energy hissed against her skin, with the smell of burning velvet and roses filling the lab. With a roar, Martha released a pulse of red fire that shattered Margot's weapon and sent the girl flying backwards. Margot hit the far wall with a bone-crushing thud. Her yellow aura flickered like a dying candle. Martha was on her before she could breathe, grabbing Margot by the hair and slamming her head into the central obsidian pillar. Once, twice, the stone cracked. "You are good, petite spy," Martha rasped, with her face being centimeters from Margot's. "But I have the strength of 10 lives in my veins right now. You are a candle in a hurricane, I believe." She didn't kill her. She released a burst of massive force that sent Margot sliding across the floor towards the hatch. Margot coughed, with blood staining her lips, amber eyes being wide with the realization that she was outmatched significantly. She knew she had lost. She looked at me, then at the falling spire, and scrambled into the darkness of the shaft to find Alex. Martha turned back to me. The insane triumph in her eyes softened, but only slightly. She approached the tank, with her red velvet dress swinging to the sides, skin glowing with a violent, translucent light. "Max," she whispered, with her forehead touching the glass. "Regarde-moi. Look at what I did for you." I looked. I saw the love, I saw the grief, but I also saw the gold essence under my own skin reflecting in her pupils. She wasn't just looking at the boy she loved, she was looking at her own survival. Martha raised her fist. Her red aura was peaking in a blinding flash. She slammed it into the center of the tank. The glass didn't just break, it detonated. A tidal wave of freezing stasis fluid hit the floor in a roar of ice and ozone. I felt a sudden, terrifying weight of gravity on my atrophied limbs. I fell forward. My real lungs were screaming as they took their first breath of real air in months. It felt like breathing in shards of glass. Martha caught me. She pulled my skeletal, pale body against her blood-soaked dress. The smell of her, Louis's iron blood scent, the deep moss of the elven woods, filled my head. I clutched at her ragged sleeves with my weak fingers, skin feeling like it was being scorched by her touch. "I have you," she whispered, with her grip being so tight it felt like she was trying to merge our bodies. "I have you, and nobody is ever going to put you in a cage again, I promise you, mon cœur." We stood there in the ruins of level 81. The spire was groaning as it began slowly tilting into the void. But then, the warmth of the rescue shifted. Martha's grip suddenly spasmed. She let out a jagged, pained gasp. I felt it through her skin. The elven power she had consumed as a buffer was evaporating. Without the elven cooling, the mana of the 12 archmages was beginning to shred her again. She was leaking. Red and gold sparks began to fly from her skin, and she swayed, nearly dropping me. "Martha?" I managed to croak. My voice was a ghost, a dry rattle in my throat. She didn't answer. She looked at me and her eyes changed. The love didn't disappear, but it was eclipsed by a cold, predatory necessity. She looked at my chest, where the gold essence pulsed, a rhythmic, sun-bright heart that she needed to stop the burning. Sasha's voice echoed in my head, sounding like a prophecy. "Look at her eyes. See if she's looking at you, or if she's looking at the gold." "Pardon-moi, Max," she whispered, as her voice was trembling with a terrifying hunger. I have to stay whole for us." She didn't wait. She pressed her palm against my chest, and I felt it instantly, a violent, icy pull. She wasn't just taking my power, she was reaching into my bones, drinking the gold essence directly from the source. It was an agony unlike anything the department had ever done to me. It felt like my soul was being pulled through a needle. I looked at her eyes, and there was no Martha there. There was only a starving wolf. She was healing herself with my life. Her skin was glowing brighter as mine turned gray. I was her refill. Sasha was right. I was just a battery, and even the girl I loved was willing to burn me to keep her own light from fading. "Martha, stop," I wheezed. But she only pulled harder. The betrayal hit me harder than the drain. The emotional weight of it, the realization that I had traded one cage for another, triggered something in the gold essence. My heart didn't just beat, it roared. The gold power reacted to my heartbreak, to the raw devastation of her touch. A low, rhythmic hum began to vibrate in my bones. The gold essence under my skin flared, turning from a soft glow to a blinding nuclear white. "Max?" Martha gasped with her eyes widening in realization. But it was too late. The outburst was coming. The sun was tired of being bottled, and the boy was tired of being used. My heart didn't just beat, it detonated. A blinding, nuclear white gold light erupted from my chest. It wasn't a heat. It was pure, solid pressure. The shockwave slammed into Martha, throwing her backwards with enough force to crack the obsidian pillar behind her. The feed was broken. I fell to the floor, gasping. My skin was glowing with a violent, unstable radiance. The laboratory on level 81 vanished in a cloud of golden dust and red sparks. The dust hadn't even settled when the air in the center of the lab tore open. It wasn't a red wound or a yellow thread. It was a sharp, geometric breach of orange static. Sasha stepped through. Her grey cloak was snapping in the wind of the spire's collapse. She looked at the wreckage, at Louis's remains, at the shattered glass tank, and finally at Martha, who was struggling to get up on her feet. Her red aura was flickering and weak. "I told him you were a starving wolf, Martha," Sasha said, with her voice being like a scalpel. She didn't look at me yet. Her focus was entirely on the vampire. "You couldn't even wait 10 minutes before you started eating him. Stay back, little nasty bitch," Martha roared, with her voice cracking. She tried to summon a wave of red fire, but it sputtered and died. The elven power was spent, and the explosion had left her magically hollow. "He's mine. I reclaimed him." "You reclaimed the battery," Sasha countered. She raised her hand and a storm of orange needles materialized in the air, precise, clinical, and lethal. But the department doesn't allow unauthorized withdrawals. The duel was brief and one-sided. Martha lunged, her claws extended, but Sasha moved with a calculated grace that made Martha look clumsy. Sasha flicked her wrist, and the orange needles pinned Martha's shadow to the floor, literally anchoring her in place. Martha let out a jagged scream of frustration. Her eyes darted towards me. She was reaching out with her fingers trembling. Max, please come to me. Don't listen to this whore. Sasha walked over to me, kneeling in the gore and the glass. She looked at my face, and for a second, her clinical mask slipped. There was a flicker of something that looked like genuine regret. I'm sorry it had to be this way, Max, she whispered. But you were never meant to be a hero. You were meant to be a pillar. She grabbed my arm, and the orange heat of her magic wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, suppressing the golden nova. I looked at Martha one last time. She was licking blood. Her face was a mask of insane grief and hunger. Max, she shrieked, as the spire gave a final, terminal groan. The central white needle, the core of the spire, finally snapped. The sound was like a planet cracking in half. Gravity failed completely. On the lower levels, I saw the flicker of the yellow portal closing as Alex and Margot vanished into the unknown. They had escaped this exploding graveyard. The lab on the level 81 began to slide into the white abyss. Martha, realizing she had lost both the fight and her source, let out a final, haunting cry. She ripped her shadow free from Sasha's needles and threw herself into her own red portal, vanishing into the Simeon corridor just as the floor beneath her disintegrated. Hold your breath, Max, Sasha commanded. She pulled me into the orange breach. As we slipped into the static, I saw the spire fall. The great black needle, the pride of the department, the cage of my life, tumbled into the infinite white void, a jagged splinter disappearing into a sea of nothingness. The white order of Darton was broken. The balance was now just a memory. The last thing I felt before the darkness took me was the cold, clinical grip of Sasha's hand and the echoing silence where my heart used to be. The firewood was gone. The room was dark, and the sun was in the hands of the people who knew exactly how to use it.